Thanks for joining for this episode of the TechSpective podcast. I have Derek Manky from Fortinet. So, Derek, if you could give a little bit of just background on yourself, and I mean, I think Fortinet's a pretty well-known company, but a little bit of background on Fortinet.
Yep, sure. So Derek Manky, I'm our Chief Security Strategist, Global VP Threat Intel. I've been 22, almost 20, almost just over 22 years now at Fortinet. I lead our FortiGuard Labs Threat Intel team. So what does that mean? It's basically doing all the latest up-to-date research on threat actors, cybercrime, nation-state APT, the cybercrime economy and crime services, what's now, what's ahead, and then strategizing how to curate all that into threat reports, but also strategy working with customers and public and private partnerships worldwide, just to make an impact and disrupt the big problem that we face day to day.
All right. First of all, just make sure I heard you right. You've been at Fortinet for 22 years.
Yes, correct. Yes.
That's an insane amount of time to be at a single company in 2026. Like that, like nobody is at a company for 22 years anymore.
Yeah, it's definitely a long. It doesn't feel that long. So I've been following threat landscape over 25 years, but it's such an interesting and dynamic space. So that's why it's I mean, I actually started my career as a reverse engineer and a threat analyst. In the weeds, looking at malware and executables and all the bad stuff that's happening on a code level basis. But then wanted to do more, right, and expand that into obviously taking that into actionable intelligence, into the world of threat intelligence. At the bigger scale of things with cybercrime, and it's been my journey through the course of 22 years.
And I will say, I just want to frame it that is, I'm that's not an indictment. I'm more in awe. Like it's a testament to both you and Fortinet. Because I mean, a lot of companies from 22 years ago don't exist anymore, and a lot of companies that have existed longer than that, lay off 10,000 people on a whim.
Yeah, it's true, and I think what's driven that is it's not. I mean, yes, there's what I follow, so the threat intelligence and threat landscape part, but that's tightly coupled to technology, right? I mean, look at all the changes over the land, Fortinet included. We're a big innovator over the last, Fortinet was founded in 2000, so 26 years. There's a lot of big changes. It was very simple, as we know. I joined in 2004. It was very simple in terms of threat landscape back then. And then as you add more and more technology and you get into obviously all the cloud developments and all these different things that happen, there's always a threat element to it. And I think that's what's kept it very interesting to me too.
Yeah. Well, and the threat landscape is dynamic and constantly evolving. So there's some job security there. Just to it's not like there's going to come a point where they're like, well, we don't need any more threat landscape discussion. So let's start with so the Fortinet puts out the annual threat landscape report. Between 25 and 26, there is a significant increase in ransomware victims. Now, I once upon a time worked at Cyberreason, and we focused on, we did a lot of focus on ransomware, and put out ransomware reports, every 6 months or so. Anecdotally, I thought things were trending down, but maybe that's just that I don't hear about it as much. Maybe like we've gotten numb to it, so it doesn't make the headlines anymore. So, what do you think is driving a surge in ransomware?
Yeah, so good question. I mean, there's a lot of reasons, I would say. And to be clear, we're talking about victims, right? So we have reported, I've been working on our threat landscape report for decades, right? And yeah, you're right. If we look years back, we were reported on volume of ransomware. So I'm talking about volume. So these are detected ransomware payloads trying to target organizations. Years back, we actually did see a decline in that. Why? Because the trend over the last several years, and certainly in 2025, has been a work smarter, not harder approach, right? Meaning instead of what we call spray and pray and trying to hit as many targets as possible, tying more tailored intelligence from a cybercrime aspect into potential victims they can hit. So that was the case years back, right? Where we actually saw not only the attempted victims or targets, the volume decreasing in that, which by the way wasn't, and we were even clear about it back then. That's not a good thing because we're seeing volume decline. It was also, if you follow the blockchain, transactions, right? So payments of ransom, all of that was also on the increase. So it was like a opposite effect. We saw a volume decrease, but an increase in payments, meaning that there were indeed some more victims. So now we're looking at this at a different lens from from the previous report in 2024 to 2025. And yeah, indeed, it was a big increase, about 389%, over 7,800 victims. And this is based off of dark web intelligence from what we're seeing, through our recon team, right? Why? Because, as I said, work smarter, not harder, but there's simply more. And I know I'll be the first one to say it on this podcast, but, the weaponization of AI. I mean, it's true. We are seeing AI-enabled cybercrime, crime service kits like WormGPT, FraudGPT, new ones that we highlight in the report, like brute force AI, Hexstrike AI, all these things that are just lowering the barrier of entry, making operations more efficient. I mean, cybercrime's a business. More efficient, more targeted, therefore an easier reach to these victims. And the sectors haven't changed, by the way. Like manufacturing, so operational technology, manufacturing has been the #1 target 3 years in a row now. There's a reason for that too, because they know that cyber criminals can extort more money from critical services, right?
Or and there's obviously a calculus to it if you're the victim. Like when once upon a time when I was in the cybersecurity trenches at EDS in support of General Motors, like I was working with some of the manufacturing plants, and even when I was working more on the IT side and we were deploying like Microsoft cluster server systems and stuff, but the plant managers would very much emphasize that the an hour of downtime is like $10 million. And so, if you have a ransomware attack and you take down a manufacturing plant, if you're General Motors, you say, well, someone will say, well, you should never pay the ransom. But, if you look at it and you go, okay, but the ransom's only $1 million. I'm going to lose 10 million if I'm down for an hour. So
yes. Yep. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Of course, we always advocate don't pay the ransom, but in reality, without the proper IRR, like incident response readiness and planning and all those things we can talk about, the reality is, these organizations do get backed into the corner and it becomes a business decision. Yeah. Sorry, just not on another tangent, but which, of course, the issue with that is it's feeding the hand that bites them, so to say, for lack of a better word. I know that's reverse, but it's fueling the pockets of cyber criminals, right? And more often than not, they get bolder, they get more resources, and then they come back for more too.
Yeah. I was going to say, a couple of years back, it's been like, John, 2-3 years now, when we start, as ransomware evolved, to double extortion, triple extortion. But then there became the ransomware. We were still calling it ransomware, but it was like the attack where I'm not going to encrypt your data. I'm just going to exfiltrate your data and extort you. And I remember thinking at the time that was kind of a brilliant business move, because we have things like SEC reporting requirements and stuff that are hard to get around if you're trying to pay a ransom. I mean, they're hard to get around if your network is knocked offline. It's hard to be secret about it when your company gets shut down. But if all that happens is they've stolen all your data and it's just a back channel conversation you're having, but the public doesn't need to know about it, it makes it a little bit easier. Now, we've also still seen instances where maybe a company doesn't pay the ransom quickly enough, and the ransomware threat actors themselves have been the ones to report to the SEC to say, hey, just letting you know.
Yeah.
So it's crazy. Well, and so actually, I want to go back to that. You talk about the spike in AI on the threat side, and then the AI tools available for ransomware. It's like, and going back a few years, back to when I was working at Cyberreason and stuff. We talked a lot about just how sort of mature the ransomware business market had become. Like, it wasn't, we're not just talking about someone creating malware in their basement. Like, these are full-fledged businesses with like customer service departments, to help you walk through how to pay the ransom, and accounts payable, and it's spawned offshoot networks where you have service providers who are like, well, I don't actually do ransomware, I just do initial access, and then I sell you the keys to get in so you can do the ransomware. Or I don't do ransomware, I just facilitate payment. I'm just like handling the blockchain on the back end. And so like you can have a business that is just servicing the ransomware without being a ransomware provider yourself per se. And I'm kind of curious, like how that business is being disrupted by AI, just like normal businesses are being disrupted by AI. Or it's like if you've built your whole business on being able to execute ransomware on behalf of people, and then someone comes along and says, or I can just use this AI tool and I can do it myself.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So so I agree with this. This is a phenomenon it's an evolution, right? We've witnessed, as you said, years back. It was these operations to groups were very monolithic, so they would handle everything through the kill chain, all the MITRE attack phases, you name it, everything from doing the reconnaissance to the initial access to all the stuff in between, lateral movement, exfiltration, to their strategy and impact, and directly by the operators, right? I mean, I remember doing my first ransomware talk in 2010 at a security conference in Toronto called Sector, and it was just very basic. They were just getting the asymmetric keys together. There was no ransom as a service or affiliate models. So again, it was just the like Zeus botnet back then, right? Which became ransom as a service later. But they're all doing everything monolithically, basically. It's like all under their control. And then ransom as a service came out, which is now the dominant model. And hundreds of these affiliates that sign up to get commission, each with their own strategy, but still handling that whole chain themselves. As you said, now with these crime services turnkey, and roles, that's definitely evolved over the last couple of years. And we actually saw a lot of, we have it in the report too, right? We talk about all the not only stolen credentials, but contextual data now that's being sold by these actors. That's one role. They don't have to do the whole attack chain, the initial access brokers you talked about. What's becoming disruptive now, we haven't fully seen it, but certainly when we have this conversation a year from now, this was in our threat predictions too, that we author every year, that went out in Q4 last year. I fully expect that to be very disruptive, right? So we are seeing indications of it right now, but not so much on the disruption between groups, but more of the scale that we're seeing again on the increase in ransomware victims and all of that. When it comes to disruption, what I expect to see, and we're seeing some of this already, are shadow agents being put into the marketplaces. So instead of a human doing the initial access broker auctioning, and here's the data that I have, just like there's always a mirror inverse, right? We're going to see the agents more doing that, which will allow groups then to have that in their own operations. So it's sort of like, maybe this isn't the best analogy, but if you look at technology, and we've gone from endpoint up into the cloud, back into hybrid models, now into custom built data centers again, because people want control of that. I think we're going to see the same thing with cybercrime, right? Where it's gone into basically outsourced models, and now with these agentic systems that are going to be available in the future. And we can get into that. There's some kits already like Hexstrike AI, brute force AI. That's going to enable more disruption and more more arrows in the quivers of attackers.
Yeah. So on the topic of AI, I mean, there's been a lot of talk since ChatGPT came out of like just how much that can escalate things for threat actors. Now, being able to streamline things, being able to, if nothing else, being able to craft phishing attacks that make sense in English, and aren't obviously a phishing attack. But they're just as AI will allow me to do more and do more faster in what I do, or allow you to do it, and just as there are legitimate uses. Again, like you said, the mirror side of that is that the threat actors can also use AI to do things faster and do things at a greater scale. When as you're putting the report together, what sort of like techniques and trends are you seeing in terms of that, and what impact is that having on organizations in terms of being able to defend effectively?
Yeah, so I would say different AI components across the attack chain again. So what you mentioned, that was the first use case naturally that we saw. And by the way, when we talk about AI, I mean there's different AI, right? And there is generally everybody talks about large language models today, right? So transformers, GPT, large language models. Then there's quantitative AI models, discriminative, like the traditional machine learning, which we in the industry, Fortinet included, have been doing a very long time, since 2010. Those are custom built for singular tasks like malware identification, drive-by download identification, malicious websites, and so forth. So generally today, though, we're talking about the GPTs and the LLMs, and that's in the past. The blue team is when it comes to AI innovation, the blue teams have been way far ahead because we've had to, right, as an industry, because of the just massive growth of the threat landscape. For attackers, they hadn't really had to invest in that. When large language models came along, attackers saw this as, hey, this is a great new toy. I wouldn't say toy, let's say tool that I can use to enhance my businesses, right, or my business services. So naturally, because of LLMs, yeah, their strength is natural language, right? So that's why we saw these services like FraudGPT, WormGPT, and the trend with these is they're super cheap. Like, Tony, under $1,000, US for a license in a year, and you get access to these GPT models with no guardrails. So you can ask them to do malicious things, craft a spear phishing email against the CFO in this organization based off of their profile, and it will go and give you something crafted to that, right? So that's one of the trends, but that's not novel. Like, we've been seeing that now for a better part of over a year. What's changing now is more and more tools beyond just these GPTs. So again, things like brute force AI, we talk about this in the report. If you think about traditional brute force, it's very noisy. It's not intelligence, right? It's dumb. It's just trying to do password spraying attacks against SSH or whatever you're trying to get into, and it's very noisy. These kits are much more intelligent, right? So they're looking at attack surface, they're looking at potential vulnerabilities and open ports and all these different, even credentials. So instead of just password spraying, using smartly injected credential stuffing from fresh combo lists that are being sold on the dark web that relate to employees at an organization, right? It's much more intelligent. So the trend, actually, we highlight this in the report, is very interesting. And this goes back to the work smarter, not harder. We actually saw a 22% decrease in brute force attempts. But just like the ransomware thing I was talking about, that's not a good thing, because we actually saw a 25% increase in global exploitation attempts. So what that means is, okay, they're trying to reduce the noise, but then scale up their operation into exploitation into systems, which again points back into that increase we're also seeing with ransomware victims too.
Yeah. Well, so this is maybe not directly related, but you reminded me of how, like, sometimes we're looking at the wrong thing. Like, so when I was early days in my IT career, and I was the network admin, and we would review logs to look for unauthorized access attempts and such. And at some point, I was like, well, wait a minute. If I have a log saying that there was an unauthorized access attempt and it was rejected, I really don't need to care about that. Like, that worked. Like it's more looking at the logs of what got through, like the things that didn't get logged because they made it in. And it reminds me of that the thing that you see go around every few months, or at least I see it probably at least once a year. The anecdote about the like B-17 bomber in World War II coming back with the bullet holes, and them saying, "Hey, we need to fix where the reinforce where the bullet holes are," and they're like, "Well, no, you need to reinforce where the bullet holes aren't." Because obviously those bullet holes were irrelevant. The plane made it back.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And those bullets are flying fast now, by the way. So that honestly, that was one of the biggest. So this is a metric we look at every year. And this will, if you're asking me one of like the biggest trends I'm seeing, and this is related to everything we just talked about with the AI acceleration of all those different elements, not just the phishing emails that can be sent out, but also collecting all the data on reconnaissance through social media profiles, all of that, and tying it into payloads that can be made into getting into a target and so forth. The time to exploit window is shrinking. So we have a measurement where we look at critical outbreaks, so big events that are happening, from how long when those CVEs are basically published to when attackers, so these are end day attacks, to when attackers are actually capitalizing on that, like creating a campaign and hopping on it. If we look at things like in the past, like Log4Shell, Log4j, Log4Shell, those things, it was pretty quick, about like 7 or 8 days. Last year in the report, that shrunk to under 5 days. And in this report, so when I say last year, sorry, 2024, 2025, it's gotten even tighter. Like it's about a 24 to 48 hour window now. And I think, again, a year from now, we're going to be talking minutes to hours potentially. So that's been a big change too.
Well, so in years past, when I've looked at threat data and stuff, and I used to every month write a article about Microsoft Patch Tuesday and talk about all the things they fixed and stuff. And we always talk about when 0 days are discovered and stuff, because it makes for good headlines. But the reality traditionally has been that that's not it makes a sexy headline, but it's not the way that most attacks were happening. The attackers are still. I mean, first of all, if you have a tried and true, you could probably still go out right now and find a pretty significant number of systems that still have log4j vulnerabilities. So it's like you don't need a 0 day because the existing things are just fine. You can use the old ones, but from what it sounds like, and I'll give you the opportunity to agree or disagree. The advent of AI tools kind of shifts that. Like where 5 years ago, threat actors might have been like, well, there's so much effort involved in finding a 0 day and then figuring out how to reverse engineer and come up with the exploit for the 0 day, when there's already all these perfectly good exploits out there that I can go after things that we already know about. But if I have AI tools, all of a sudden I can say, hey, you know what? I can just plug this into an AI tool. I've got an agent that does that. I have an agent that just reverse engineers the 0 day and comes up with an exploit in 10 minutes, and then I'm off to the races.
Yeah. Overall, agree. So it's interesting, right? So there's the reality is it's rapidly evolving, to be clear again. So work smarter, not harder. I'll go back to that. Yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, attackers always follow a path of least resistance. If they don't have to burn a 0 day or as you said, reverse engineer, create a proof of concept, they're not going to do that because there's all these other opportunities that present themselves, the unpatched systems, the end days you talked about, but beyond that too. So we're actually not seeing true indication of wide scale vulnerability discovery, like through AI, right? Vulnerability discovery, exploitation. I do think that's coming at some point. It's just attackers haven't had to invest into that a lot because all these other things are working for them. I think when more resistance is created, they're going to invest more time and effort into that. But it's going to be an interesting effect too, right? Because now, in that not too far off future, when you have those systems in place, weaponized from an attacker, it's going to drop. It's going to commoditize. I mean, there was 40,000 plus CVEs, reported last year. That's a lot. That's a big attack surface. You have an automated approach to create all these 0 days for that. The value of a 0 day is actually going to drop quite significantly. It's going to become more of a commodity. But then on vice versa, look at the blue team side. It's this arms race all the time, right? This supercharged arms race where it's okay, now we can discover vulnerabilities proactively and patch them and all of that. Like there's always that argument to make. But I think the important thing to point out, the reality is that because attackers don't have to burn those 0 days, what we're actually seeing is another phenomenon where cyber criminals are acting more and more like APT, like nation state actors. In fact, we're seeing shared infrastructure between them as well too. But on the cyber criminal side, they prefer to try to be as less noisy as possible, hence the work smarter, not harder, and use living off the land techniques, right? Keep in mind, an exploit isn't the only way into a system. Going back to the GPT models, the spear phishing, the social engineering aspects, credential stuffing through all these things. Like there's all these other avenues that are being supercharged now through these AI services. And I think that's what cyber criminals are preferring right now.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it's almost trite at this point. I feel like everyone says this, but identity in many ways, it just is the new perimeter. Like we spent many years saying, well, the perimeter's gone, the perimeter's gone, the perimeter's gone. And that might be true in terms of like the firewall perimeter of the office building, because now I've got, all these mobile devices and whatever. But there's always a perimeter. And in this case, the perimeter, it is kind of its identity. And to your point, if I can get your credentials, whether that's through phishing, credential stuffing, however I get them, if I can just log in as Derek,
yep,
I don't need an exploit.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. So that's the reality. And now those services are it goes back to the growing crime services we're seeing. We highlight in the report. I mentioned a couple of them. There's other ones as well too, like full dark web consulting services where, again, from the eyes of a cyber criminal, it's all about getting into these forums, networking, getting invites into private forums. Just these are human techniques. And again, it's quite simple, actually. Agents are going to be able to do that and already are starting to do that in the future. There's already services using those agents to collect all the data on dark web, trained on dark web, to give malicious advice. So a human doesn't have to sift through all those forums and scour information that they're looking for, right?
Don't we just call that grok? No, I'm kidding. What advice would you like? So, given what you see with just the evolution from 25 to 26 and where we're at now, what do you think defenders should be focused on? Like, I mean, obviously you have to focus on everything, but like if I have to pick one thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's good news here. We're always talking about all the, threat landscape can become depressing sometimes, right? Talking about all the bad news that's out there. I think there's good news, right? I mean, like there's simple approaches to be very effective against this. One, first of all, if we look at the problem, the shrinking time to exploit window, we're talking 24 to 48 hours. The good news is, well, first of all, the reality is defenders need to be able to get visibility and to operate faster than that, right? For those critical outbreaks. It's not possible with only a human-driven approach. So in terms of what defenders need to do to stay ahead of the actors, it's an industrialized defense, but using some simple AI-enabled tools. It's essentially building even a simple SOC, Security Operations Center. It doesn't have to be a large enterprise, super advanced. It can certainly be that. But as you said, looking at things that, not just the detections that are working, but what's my attack surface look like? So attack surface management through EASM, external attack surface management, IASM, the internal attack surface management, and putting that into a continuous model. This is CTEM. Like I highly recommend CTEM, which is continuous threat exposure management. It's like in the past, doing security assessments was very manual. A pen test, you would get a pen test done maybe once or twice a year. It's a report. Here's your snapshot, all the things you need to do to address that. That's static. It's not good enough anymore, right? Just because of how fast these threats are moving. So what I really like about CTEM is by enabling a couple of things between a simple framework from attack surface management plugged into, let's say, EDR and so forth, you can have a lot of those decision trees that are at least happening, like the day-to-day happening on a very, assessing security priorities, escalating that to an analyst so that they can act on it quickly. It's not pure machine to machine. We can get there, but it's still going back to that augmentation we were talking about earlier from analysts. It's a really good way to respond to the velocity. But essentially, security operations, there's different SOCs, right? Level 1 SOC, level 2 SOC, level 3, they get more advanced. But the good news is these turnkey SOCs exist out there today. We have it in our FortiAnalyzer. There's managed services you can get if you don't have experience or headcount. Like there are solutions out there to do it at little cost overhead too. In fact, it saves cost overhead because you don't have to go and hire 5 or 10 headcount into your SOC, right?
Yeah. I mean, going back to continuous threat exposure management, I had some focus on that a few years back, and it's funny. I was at Cyberreason, and we were focused on XDR, and then I went to Epiphany Systems, which became Revealed, and we're doing what we were doing before Gartner came out with the report and said, "Hey, we're going to call this continuous threat exposure management." And we were like, "Oh, hey, that's what we do." And I actually see the parallels between those two things where I've said, okay, well, XDR was kind of like taking the, we had EDR, and then someone said, well, let's do network detection and response, and let's do, cloud detection and response. And then XDR to me was like, okay, well, what if we kind of wrap it all together and then look at it holistically, but from a single vendor, basically saying, okay, we'll have CrowdStrike's XDR or SentinelOne's XDR. And CTEM to me was saying, well, you've already got all these tools. You just need to figure out how to use them more effectively together on a regular basis. But ultimately, I think one of the things that I think organizations in general need to realize and focus on is just you're not going to fix everything. It's everything. Your attack surface is constantly changing. The threat landscape is constantly changing. Even if you said you fixed it all right now, it won't be all fixed an hour from now. So there's always going to be something. And what I feel like continuous threat exposure management gives you, if you have it done right, is the ability to apply like the 80-20 rule to kind of say, okay, well, what can I do that's going to reduce the most of my exposure? Like I'm not going to get rid of all of it. But if I instead of running around with my hair on fire trying to fix everything and not really making a material impact on my risk exposure, I can identify, okay, but if I do these 10 things, it actually gets rid of like 80% of my exposure.
No, you're bang on. It's exactly that. It's identifying the exposures and then prioritizing the response. It's risk management, right? And at the end of the day, it's significantly better than doing it manually, with a human-based approach. It can be faster. Nothing is ever 100% here, right? But it's a valid way to do that. And I think it's the important thing is the solutions are there. We're a research partner with MITRE. We have been for many years now. So we work on a lot of different initiatives. So we're part of the projects that we publish, which by the way become threat intel projects, which become open source on GitHub. But this is all part of the Center for Threat Informed Defense. We talk about this a lot. From MITRE's point of view, threat-informed defense, which in my point of view is the same thing as CTEM. It's the same idea, right? It's identifying the threat, being informed of that threat, and then doing detection engineering, to your point on the bullets, not just saying, hey, what's working, we're good, we're stopping all this, but what's not working, simulating attacks, breach and attack simulation, all that stuff that comes in CTEM, and fixing it in a continuous cycle. It's the same idea, it's just now the solutions exist through CTEM, right?
Yeah. Yeah, going back to the bullets thing, like I feel like that's where like I'm trying to think of another example, but that's where like user behavior analytics comes in or whatever, where it's like, okay, well, I don't want to just look at like, did a bad guy get in, or did a malicious exploit, execute in my environment. I want to look at, did Derek log in from Singapore somehow, even though he was just at work 10 minutes ago? Is Derek accessing files Derek shouldn't be accessing? Like those are the kind of things that become much more relevant.
Yeah.
But let's talk about so you mentioned your work with MITRE, and I know that Fortinet is committed to collaborating across the industry and with the public sector. So you mentioned MITRE, but like why is that an important focus for Fortinet? And can you and like what other areas are you working on that?
Sure. So this goes back to the 22 years at the start of the conversation. I think this is also why, this is obviously a lot of things we're doing, from customer protection and threat intel, but to me, the commitment to collaboration, public-private partnerships, I think is incredibly important. It's tied into our CSR, our corporate social responsibility at Fortinet, specifically on a pillar of reducing cybersecurity risk to society. So that means a lot of things, right? That means innovation to, like with MITRE, as we just talked about, creating new frameworks that we can use for threat intelligence in the industry. But then also disruption, right? I mean, like the thing is, we talk about all these problems, as I said, and they are very real. Organizations pay ransom, even though we don't advocate to, for all the other reasons of not having proper playbooks and readiness to find all that. And it's just fueling cybercrime, right? It's a massive industry. No one knows the exact number, but we work with the World Economic Forum. We're a founding member of the Center for Cybersecurity in 2019. And we have some estimates, right? It's big. It's like, 10, 11 trillion dollars US. It's growing fast because of all these issues that we talk about, the more strategic approaches, to your point, on manufacturing plants, and $10 million, as you said, or whatever it is, if they go down for an hour. So we know it's a big problem. We want to create accountability and deterrence models in the industry, just to show that cyber criminals are not invincible, that we can hold them accountable, to work stronger with us, because we're sitting on a lot of intelligence at Fortinet, not only Fortinet, of course, but ourselves, to use that intelligence and disrupt threat actors. So we're doing a lot in that. We've been an Interpol Gateway partner since 2018, so we're a private sector partner with Interpol. And then more recently, we founded Cybercrime Atlas under the World Economic Forum 3 years ago. This is a great initiative where we have over 70 volunteer organizations every week getting together, looking at targets, mapping, because no one knows, like you mentioned, these different business units. We have an idea, but we don't have a full map of that cyber criminal ecosystem, all the shared infrastructure. Attribution is always very difficult. We know these things are coming from actors, but who? Really who? Like, who are the people behind this? That's difficult. It takes a village, right? So these are a lot of these areas that we're working on in partnership with Cybercrime Atlas. It's all about mapping that ecosystem. So we're not just going and ripping off servers offline, like botnet takedowns. Like those, historically, they kind of work, but not always, because they're going to be resilient and come back online. I mean, IP addresses and bulletproof hosting's really cheap. You can arrest one person, and then someone else will take their place. So it has to be this holistic effort of all the above, where we're actually finding out, if we're going to take these operations offline, we need to hit them in all the spots it hurts. So yes, arresting people, infrastructure takedown, seizing of crypto assets, returning those assets, or the funds to victims, all of that stuff in once. And so we've done several operations. Serengeti 2.0, Operation Red Card recently was another example. These have been thousands of arrests through partnership because of intelligence that Fortinet shared and other partners. And over $100 million US returned to victims. It's the feel good work and important work in industry, I think. And another example recently is the world's first with cybercrime bounty. This is something we launched with Crime Stoppers International. They have a great system, anonymous, secure platform for physical crimes, robberies, and thefts, and all of this to put monetary rewards and incentives for people who might know about that crime to report it, so that the intelligence can supercharge and bolster law enforcement investigations, reduce strain on law enforcement, and so forth. We're doing the same thing on cybercrime. So I'm really excited about that. That's brand new, by the way. We've just launched it. But the idea is to incentivize ethical hackers, gray hat hackers, victims, anyone who can report intelligence and leads into a bigger engine so we can work together to disrupt cybercrime.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that's always kind of fascinated me is understanding the motivations, and then it's changed over time. Obviously, like I was, to date myself, I was in the trenches for like Code Red and SQL Slammer and stuff, and I remember like SQL Slammer, I spent like literally all weekend. I mean, the attack was like on a Friday. I was on like dual phone calls like simultaneously, like just 24/7 conference calls trying to work through stuff.
Always on a Friday, by the way, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I remember coming out of that weekend with a little bit of respect for, because I could step back and kind of like be like, okay, well, that really sucked that I had to work through the weekend, and it sucks that they took down the internet globally, but damn, that was some pretty innovative code. And so like having that level of respect, and then my next thought just kind of being like, imagine if they used that for good instead, and so it's like, you just kind of wonder about the motivations of people who like have that skill and and can create very innovative, solutions, using code, and just, do you want to be someone who's using your creativity and your innovations for good or not?
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's actually another reason we started Cybercrime Bounty. I mean, Atlas is tied to that as well, too, but that's the deterrence piece. That's something we got to have a whole conversation on that, but it's not talked about enough, is that it's the next generation of cyber criminals. So like we talk about attack surface and the tools and all those things, but the people themselves, that is an issue. I mean, oftentimes we see youth getting into cyber crime through gaming, right? They get onto gaming channels, they're looking for hacks or things to give them better, booster packs or whatever it is on their games, and they start talking to other people who are involved in these forums, and they see some opportunity there. So yeah, we're also just trying to send a message back to show that it's not okay, and there's other good things you can be doing, obviously cybersecurity and all these roles that are available too, right?
Yeah. All right. Well, I think, I mean, unless you want to talk about Star Trek and Star Wars, and
Speaking of good,
first of all, let's go there for a minute. I will say that I always toss that out as a joke or whatever, but once upon a time there was a quasi-religious debate, Star Trek versus Star Wars, or Marvel versus DC. But at least in the Star Trek versus Star Wars realm, I was always kind of like, why are you making me pick? Like, I like both, for different reasons or whatever. But they're both good. I'm not sure I have a winner.
Yeah. Well, I mean, on the good side, again, that's the thing. There's a lot of great opportunities out there, right? That's the thing. Going back to the AI conversation, there's so many new job opportunities. It's quite incredible. So I think the future looks really, I mean, we always talk about the problems again, but I think there's a lot of good things still on the horizon for job opportunities, for technology, for the disruption, all the things that we're doing. And I talked about this at RSA on a panel with Interpol as well too, the work that we're doing on disruption.
Well, how I guess this goes back to my question about motivation. I know, you had the panel with Interpol at RSA, disrupting cybercrime networks, continuously and at scale. I mean, I'd be interested to know, like, kind of like what you're learning from that. But then the reason I even thought about the whole thing with SQL Slammer and the motivations behind attackers is just kind of like, when we have these, like, bug bounty programs and things like that, it's like, okay, well, we're providing a path to say, hey, look, if you want to do the right thing, we will, that is a way you can make money. You can monetize doing the right thing. I don't know that it's always as much money as you can get doing the wrong thing. And it really just is, it depends, and with that comes the risk of, okay, but if I do the right thing, I get some money. If I do the wrong thing, I might get more money, but also risk jail.
Right.
So I have to take those things all into account. But for some people, maybe it's not even about money. Maybe it's just, the adventure of it all. Just, can I do it? It goes back to, like, old school, kind of early days attackers, right, or whatever, which is just trying to see if I could do it.
Bragging rights, right?
Right, and I realize we've evolved, pretty far from there to where it is a full-fledged, business with entire corporate infrastructures and stuff for a lot of these threat actors. And now, like, and you alluded to this earlier on, not only that sort of cybercrime business infrastructure, but in the past few years, there's been a eroding of the lines between those larger threat groups and nation state actors, where it's like you almost can't tell where one ends and the other one begins, because they're really collaborative. And so it's a very different world that we live in today than the days when it was just somebody messing around, the Kevin Mitnicks of the world, but I feel like those people probably still exist. Like, maybe that's how you end up getting your first entry-level job in the cybercrime network, is, you were just curious enough to try to break into something, and then you say, hey, you know what, I think I'll do this for a living.
Yeah. I mean, it's what, like I said, and so, we discussed this, with Neil Jatani, the director at Interpol, also Microsoft Digital Crimes, on the panel, and not only the good things we're doing on disruption, but the motivations for this. I mean, it's, like I said, there is the issue of, like you said, that where is my first job going to land? And sometimes it's just by chance they got into the wrong conversation at the wrong point in time, and they saw that as an opportunity. I mentioned the gaming reference. It could be other ways. We see recruitment. Speaking of nation state and cybercrime, they're actively going out and trying to recruit. Look at the remote office worker, opportunities that they present to people. So the reality is, we just need to get ahead. So going back to the motivation, we need to get ahead of that and try to seed the thoughts into the prospective cyber criminal, and before they know that, into, again, the opportunities that we have at hand. And there's a lot, right, when it comes to just even if it's just the excitement, the adventure, like you said, when it comes to understanding all of this. That's the world of what we do. Again, why I've been 22 years at Fortinet, the threat intelligence piece, the threat hunting, and those are really the same skill sets. It's all underlying understanding how all of the concepts and all that work, but just being able to do it at good, right, research papers, get your name out there, speak at conferences, all of those things. There's a lot of good things you can do with that in the adventure, right? And there's initiatives, again, I mentioned Cybercrime Atlas, these other ones. We have Cyber Threat Alliance, which Fortinet also founded. There's all these other, tons of these industry initiatives you can get involved in on the good side too.
Well, and I feel like, another element to that is certain nations, certain regions are, outside of extradition of Western, the United States and other Western countries. And if you're in such a nation and the job market isn't very great, but the cost of living is also, so it's like, if you can manage to get, $100,000, $1 million in ransom. Like $1 million means a lot more in some countries than it does in others. So it's like that's a pretty lucrative way to get by.
Yeah, and hence why I think, just like you said, nothing's 100%. I think just like we have physical crime, and since probably almost the dawn of humanity, I think cybercrime will always exist in some form or another. We're just trying to, again, mitigate that as much as possible, and that's what all these initiatives are about. And the good news is we're making progress, which is what's important. Like, we are seeing impact, we're seeing significant activity, we're seeing more good, blue team, white hats, whatever you want to call them, coming to the table to help too, right?
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for taking the time. It's a good chat.
Yeah, it's great. Really enjoyed it. Thanks, Tony.